You know what I'd love to see us do this year?
A giant bowl of bacon with your name on it.
Well, no, I mean, yes, but we did that last year. You remember that.
It was tasty.
It was. What I would really love for us to spend time on is, say, a bit of a comparison between AWS and Azure and all the data services they provide.
Well, if you're going to do cloud, then shouldn't you also include GCP?
That's funny. So according to Gartner, I would tell you that AWS, Azure, and Alibaba are larger than Google.
Yeah, that's number 3.
You're right. Alibaba's number 3. We don't have time to talk about all 4. So we're going to focus on just the enterprise cloud service providers, AWS and Azure.
But if we're going to do that, we would need an expert on cloud.
I don't know about expert, but I have been working with cloud for, 10, 12 years or so.
So this is Rick Claus from Microsoft, and he's here to help us, spend some time going through some myths and myth understandings about cloud.
Okay, that works.
Do you have some time for us?
I do. I got, 4 or 5 questions or so, and then I got to get back in there again.
Perfect.
Because that's about how many we have.
So where do you want to start?
How about this one? Cloud is just not secure. I can't use it in my organization.
Yeah, I hear that one a lot. That one's actually kind of interesting because, in all honesty, it's a difficult conversation to have with customers because you can't really tell them that they're not secure, but we've got thousands upon thousands of people whose sole job is to ensure that we have security and integrity at every single one of our regions across the entire world, and all with the same kind of consistency and bar. Quite frankly, we've got it set up and we understand we've been working in this kind of fashion in such a way for such a long time that we've got all these extra learnings and best practices and security principles that are in place for every single kind of deployment that's out there too.
I often tell people how the cloud data center is probably far more secure than the own data center they have there. And that comes from a person who has seen the backup tapes just laying in people's cubes for anybody to walk off with.
I've actually had one issue where I've gone in just to kind of prove a point, and I've taken a picture of myself inside the person's server room to be able to show in confidence with, here you go, physical security, one of the first steps. Let's work on that.
Mm-hmm. So that conversation really is about starting with access control management as a part of the migration to cloud.
But it's not just that. It's also, if you look at the Azure Trust Center, you'll find the compliance there, all the compliance stuff that you have, the PCI, everything that you need that most companies don't have. So for me, with the financial services background, we only need, say, 3 or 4 of those compliance. Azure has all of those. And AWS, I believe, has as many as well. But the fact is, the cloud is truly much more secure than what people give credit for. Where the security really becomes kind of an issue is it really always has to do with the end user, right? It's not necessarily something with the cloud. So the end user leaves the S3 bucket open. It's not AWS doing that. Is that the default setting? Maybe. But it's still the user could always change that in order to make things, say, easier for that DevOps-y type person that just wants stuff to work.
So does that conversation begin with someone who understands AD really well, roles and groups, and then basically mapping that onto IAM?
It could. I think the conversation starts, so how I always say it, security is a shared responsibility. So just saying it's that one person in charge of AD, no, it's everybody has a responsibility when it comes to proper security.
Well, you mentioned shared responsibility. It's also a shared responsibility of understanding what you're responsible for as the customer and also what your provider is responsible for from a security perspective. So yes, definitely shared responsibility is there.
Absolutely. So, okay, next question, next myth. Cloud is only for developers.
Oh, and DevOps, because the dev is before the ops.
Okay.
You mean rub a little DevOps on it?
Yes.
Well, okay. So yes, absolutely. It does work for the purposes of doing more DevOps type practices and principles. However, what's actually rather interesting is who do you think actually uses the cloud and works with the interfaces and does stuff? It's not actually the developers.
Managers.
It's not the managers or the decision makers.
Governance.
It's the operations folks. It's the IT pros. It's the people that are actually looking after the servers, making sure that they're running. Are they monitored? Are they secure? Have they been deployed correctly? And then maybe, yes, they might be integrated into CI/CD pipelines, or maybe no, because they're not there yet with their own maturity level inside their organizations. But it's actually the operations folks. And go even one up that one, who actually uses serverless technology the most?
operations folks?
It's actually the operations folks that are using it more.
Because they don't want to package up whole applications. They just want to write a little logic and have it run.
Well, no, even more so, they're using serverless as ways of being able to run their own operations tasks without having to go off and having to build something that new. You know what? Throw some PowerShell commands into that. Have a bash script that goes off and does this sort of stuff. That runs on top of serverless because it's like this and done. You're paying for the fractions of seconds that it's actually running.
See, I would have thought that the reason IT operations make up 80% of cloud usage is because it's a handful of developers that build something that all of a sudden now gets tagged as mission critical, and they throw it over the wall, and now operations has to support it.
Well, hopefully we're not doing the throwing over the wall thing anymore.
Well, but isn't that the whole point of operations? Like IT exists when technology becomes commodity, when all your competitors are using the same thing, and it's about cost management. So of course, cloud is now just one more tool that we work with like everything else, because it's always going to end up in IT.
Right.
Okay, here's one. Cloud can't be innovative because it's made out of the same commodity stuff that we've been running. Gateway 2000, cloud, same hardware, just faster.
It's like, so the cloud run under someone's desk somewhere. That's like, so
that's a thing.
Okay, so there is commodity hardware that's in there. Absolutely, that's how you get scale. That's how you got the ability. But that's the fabric. But there's also the ability to put specialized hardware in there. What's even cooler is the fact that as you deploy, for instance, IaaS infrastructure, virtual machines on top of this fabric, which is running in the cloud, you automatically benefit from all the changes that we do with refreshing our hardware completely seamlessly. You don't even know that it's happening underneath. So all of a sudden, can be running on top of some of the latest and greatest AMD hardware. Maybe you want to go off and try some of the cutting edge NVIDIA GPU stuff that's going on. Right. I mean, heck, even before filming this, we happen to have just announced our new 6 terabyte and 12 terabytes of RAM VMs that you can now run inside of Azure.
Are those, can those be dedicated servers, or is it shared, or?
That is a virtual machine right on top of the hardware, but the hardware is big enough to be able to support that as a virtual machine.
Oh, wow.
Those are very special purpose-built ones. I mean, in fact, you can even get special purpose-built stuff like a Cray computer you can go off and rent as well.
How about Quantum?
I'm not allowed to talk about that.
Well, you are or you aren't, but you haven't decided yet. But I was going to say, actually, though, Tom has done a lot with machine learning labs and the rest of it. And so that aspect that is truly different was commodity hardware is not configurable by software. So for example, hey, this model's taking a really long time to learn. Wait a minute, you know what? I'll just spin up some GPU instances for a couple of hours, go ahead and train these models and then turn that off. So that flexibility, not at all commodity.
I think what gets lost, especially when you try to figure out, when you're looking at AWS or Azure, it's hard to know and get details about the machines. They exist, but it's not readily available. It's not easy to compare. So when you go to AWS and you're like, what's X2 large, whatever, you're like, well, how does that match to something in Azure? And there's no mapping there to say this one is this size, because the sizes are never exactly equal. One has 56 gigs of RAM, the other one has 62 or something.
That's kind of a benefit just from the perspective of it's flexible for whatever the customers want. And so maybe AWS is now seeing that their customers are looking for this type of configuration. Right. What is it? You're chopping up the CPU, chopping up how much RAM you have access to, how fast are your disks, and also what kind of network connectivity you have. Those 4 basic principles are stuff that we've all been working with as people that work in IT when we're speccing out systems to build.
Well, but that's part of the reason that we see so many of our customers who the most used cloud that they use is Azure, is that they're using our server and application monitoring tools, and they will monitor their on-prem existing VMs, and then they'll set up an instance in AWS or wherever that or in Azure, and then they'll compare the relative performance so that they can figure out how to set that instance size right. So that taking and looking at the data and figuring out on your own how big those instance size is so much easier for comparing it against what you already know.
Right. So you can literally say, oh, dial it up too big, I'm gonna dial it down a bit. Step down a notch, I can step down the notch, restart the machine, I bring it back up again. I'm now paying less for that machine. Oh, I need some more by the end of the month, bump that up 2 or 3. And in the machine learning side, I don't just wanna go big, I wanna go wide, so I can just provision 5, 10, 15, 20 more machines, 1,000 more machines, and I can still use it. You want that on commodity, but you also want the options for specialized.
I try to tell people commodity hardware doesn't mean commodity performance.
Yeah.
Okay, here's another myth for you. I hear this a lot. Cloud requires new skills.
No. I'm sorry. It does not require new skills. It requires you to pivot your existing skills.
And what do you mean?
Like literally, we were having a discussion about this earlier. He has problems being able to do subnetting in his head. and the being able to figure out the mask bits and then the network bits and then the host bits, that sort of stuff. Well, guess what? That stuff is still applicable now because of virtual networking, because of subnetting and architectures and 3-tier architectures. If you still happen to want to use those, that's all still the same.
Okay, you added me about that, but the other, but really, it's really that I find that you can use the skills that you already have in ways you wouldn't expect. Like in your example, I've come to rely on our free tool for the subnet calculator because it's just so handy and it's just quicker and it's sort of double checking my math. But the skills that you use to make sure that applications are performing the way that you would expect, the sorts of things that you care about in terms of configuration, the issues that users face, the way that you troubleshoot. Some of the interfaces are different maybe, or you are using programmatic interfaces or APIs a little bit more, but you're still using 90% of what you have been doing as a part of operations for your whole career. So a lot of it ends up being, sort of nomenclature and taxonomy and the rest of it, but you drill down to it and, oh, it's the same thing that I've been doing just on a different set of servers.
Yep. Again, I call that a pivot of your tribal knowledge of the stuff that you already know. Very simple.
Trying to say that to my database friends, my data brethren. The idea isn't that it's a completely new skill for you, because a database, let's face it, the request is either running, runnable, or suspended. It's all the same. It doesn't matter where that engine sits. So those basic skills that you have, especially as a DBA, where you understand disk and memory, network and CPU, all of that still transfers to cloud. It's just that you can also get this benefit of having the cloud service provider do a lot of things for you that you don't have to do anymore, like backups. Right? Sure, I'm still going to worry that I can't recover. Okay, well, there are ways to get around it, but you also don't have to be worried about the configuration and the reports and everything else you've been doing for decades. Troubleshooting becomes a little bit different, somewhat easier in some cases, somewhat more difficult, only because I can't go over and tell the guy in the Azure data center to go check on the server or the rack or things like that, or I can't RDP to it like I used to. So you just have to kind of take that pivot and say, all right, here are the things I can't do anymore. Here's a long list of stuff I'm still going to be able to do. Here's the very few things I can't do. Just because you can't do those things is no reason for you to say, I forget this cloud stuff, right?
Well, there's also that aspect of as you become more experienced and more senior in your career, doing the skills stuff is not as interesting as making decisions and actually helping the business based on knowledge. So for me, it feels more like it's a pivot from absolute special virtuoso skills to being able to expand what you're doing and expand your scope of influence based on using knowledge that you've spent decades collecting. We have knocked down all the myths about cloud, and everything should just go to the cloud now, right? Just all of it, everything.
Actually, as the Microsoft guy, I'm going to say no, but there's the but. Make sure you do your homework and your analysis, because there's definitely workloads that'll benefit from going to the cloud. There's a lot of them. And there's also workloads that are going to make sense to keep on premises. It depends on where your own maturity cycle is inside your organization to see if you're ready for it or not. Maybe I'm going to be much more cloud friendly and less cloud adverse, so I'm going to go ahead and look at moving all my stuff in there. Or maybe I'm going to be brand new startup or a new environment where I don't have to have this existing legacy thing. I can go in and just create it all inside of the cloud environment too. So not everything should go. That's why places like, co-locations and hosters and stuff like that, like I did a data center tour at Swift when I was in Las Vegas just recently. Whew, that is a nice colo facility.
It's pretty.
Very, very nice colo facility. They built that specifically because they felt that we needed to have a place that would have super great connectivity and provide access to the public cloud, but would still give people the ability to go and to house some of their stuff still locally where they can go see, feel, and touch it, because they weren't ready just yet.
So just like everything else with technology, you wouldn't say everything is going to technology X with cloud any more than you would with anything else. So where do you recommend that people start? Like, how do they step back and maybe look at applications or infrastructure that they haven't considered in a very long time or thought of it as monolithic, to where they start to stop and sort of figure out where those lines are to figure out what good candidates might be?
It's, again, going to be my consulting answer. It depends.
Right.
Really, the intrinsic nature of knowing your environment is going to kind of dictate which of the easy ones to go off and start with. The trick that I want to remind people of is when you're looking at moving something like a lift and shift of a particular application and all the supporting pieces of that application up into a cloud environment, use that opportunity to re-architect it and to make it better, to leverage some of the cloud technologies, and also look at possibly reimagining what that application application is doing. So you can start to use a managed instance of SQL as an example, as opposed to SQL on top of IaaS. You're going to start to use, maybe we can break this part off and make it into a microservice as opposed to a gigantic front-end web service in the front of it. So you can take advantage of some scale and that kind of stuff.
So not just lift and shift, but move and improve.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, well, but that's what a lot of our customers are doing, and what they're doing is having conversations maybe that they didn't have before with the business. Sort of go that thing where you've inherited the system, it's been running for years and years, and no one has gone to figure out whether it's actually meeting its original charter. So a lot of that seems to be also go back and figure out what parts of the business drove what technology decisions in the first place, and unbundle that. And a lot of times that will sort of identify those natural demarc points between different parts of your infrastructure.
I like that.
Well, Rick, thanks for taking the time to come here today and help debunk a handful of cloud myths. And, this cloud computing thing may be legit.
Hey, man, I've been working with it for about 10 years. I think it is.
Yeah, and all you got to do is spend a little bit of time looking at the Thwack community and what they're talking about it. Y'all have been using it for a really long time.
So you guys got this. You guys are in good hands.
$16,000 milliseconds.
Yeah, about that.